How's it going, everybody? This is going to be a long one today, so we're going to go ahead and get right into it. You guys all know, event happens. I like to go through and look at all the deck lists, and I have a lot to say about this one because, obviously, did pretty well at it. So, for people that didn't know, Winter Cup was a 3v3 team event, and effectively it was a 3 deck format. You had 3 different decks, you could not share any cards across all of them. My team took first place. We had these 3 decks. We have a Wall 7 list. We had Fire, Ice, FF6. And we had myself on Earth, Wind, Retainer, Storm. So some backstory on why we chose these decks. When the event was first announced, I was pretty sure that Wall 7 is just the best deck in the room. It has the best matchup spread, it plays the best, etc., etc. And it was a matter of figuring out which one of my teammates wanted to play it. And Alex took a liking to it very quickly. He liked kind of the way that it piloted. He liked the fact that it was actually like it's random, but there's a shocking amount of good decision making that goes into this deck. Between what your hits off of Warrior of Light are, what the correct decisions are, when to ramp, when to not ramp, etc., etc. And it's a very strange deck because it actually doesn't top deck very well. Usually, once the first Warrior of Light resolves, if they don't have the second one in hand, the deck is very capable of kind of stalling out. Cards like Samurai and Scholar are exceptionally weak top decks once you get past a couple of backups. As far as the actual deck itself goes, we had the 6 copies of Warrior of Light. Like a lot of this is pretty standard, so I'll go over the stuff that is not standard. We kept the Refia package in, which has been kind of been starting to get cut from a lot of them. I know that like it's kind of cut because it's slower than a lot of people want to play the deck. My logic was that I expected a lot of. My logic when I was talking with Alex and why he ended up sticking with Refia is that with Sid Randell being everywhere, we needed consistent outs to Sid Randell. And Refia gives this deck a top end that the Warrior variants just don't have. So not only do we have a very consistent way to deal with Sid Randell with Sarah FFL, Search Refia, and Ferris, we're also just in a position to outscale. If you have Refia plus Warrior of Light with Lena or Lunith and Sarah FFL as your backup line, the game stops being a game of Final Fantasy TCG and becomes a game of kill Refia. And when you're in that situation, you feel really, really good about where the game is going. Beyond that, I think the list is relatively standard for this type. I think like the 2 big standout different cards, the 2 copies of Ishtola. I was not a huge fan of this initially, but it did very well on the weekend, from what I understand. Alex called it the best card of the deck on the weekend, so I am not one to argue with success. But I was not initially in agreement on having this card on the deck. I actually thought that the Wind Ishtola was a better pick. But credit where credit is due. This card came up very large all weekend, to my knowledge. Beyond that, I know, like I said, it's relatively standard. If you wanted to learn the Gigawall list, this is a decent place to start, just because you don't have the Tyvis lines to have to learn. Tyvis, I think, gives the deck better top deck potential because you kind of have an extra 3 payloads you can play off of that aren't 7 CP Warrior of Light. The downside of Tyvis is you do open yourself up to just outright losing to Sid Randell. So then, talking Travis's list, Travis was between the Mono Ice Aggro discard list and this. Ended up going with 6. I believe his logic was that A, he's a better 6 pilot than the Aggro list, which I always agree with. Always play a deck you're comfortable with over the sheer power level. And Travis has been on this list since Edgar was printed in Opus 17. But also, he didn't like how the ice deck would just randomly lose. What I mean by randomly is that we both kind of identified very early that it's a pretty low agency deck. You do your top decks, you punch in. If your opponent stabilizes, you're probably going to lose. This deck has the ability to scale. Locke is probably one of the few cards as broken as 7 CPU Warrior of Light. He just requires more setup and a lot of very specific deck building constraints. Uh, the deck is very consistent because it's only on 2 colors. And the power is actually there. I think the only thing this deck really struggles with, and I think afterwards I still told Travis he might want to consider this for the future, it cannot hit a 9K to save its life. 9Ks and 10Ks are just massive problems. You have to use Umaro. You have to have a demon with enough going on where you like feel comfortable. Like play demon, haste demon, or remove their break zone to punch the thing specifically. You have to like double Umaro things, which like it means that a card like Neo X Death just shuts this deck completely down. Um, but we figured that was a risk worth taking, just given the relative other power level of the deck, and the way that we thought it matched up against the tier list was okay, it's going to struggle against the mono ice list because it can't outrug. It's going to struggle with the Warrior of Light list just because I think that deck is just probably stronger than this one. And it's going to struggle to deal with Neo X Death. But just about everything else it has a playable matchup into. And some it does very well into. Ice Lightning in particular, I know, has a really bad FF6 matchup. And then lastly, this is my list. I have a full deck breakdown on my channel if you want to go look at it. But deck did very, very well on the team event. Did not do as well in the singles event, but I had some very, very bad luck on that day. And I mean, there's only so much you can do sometimes. Like sometimes you just draw poorly, not, or your opponent hits the nuts, which is what happened a lot on Sunday. So deck went really well. Watch the other video. Go see that if you want to hear me talk about my own list and my decisions I made. So let's go over the ones that I know a little bit less about. So second place did not have a Wall 7. It had a Mono Lightning, Ice Lightning, and a Water Fire Twins list. I'm very familiar with the Mono Lightning list because this was my opponent. I played Justin twice. And this is the EX Burst 7 style, just without Shinryu, which is interesting. I believe Shinryu was on the Ice Lightning player's deck. So I'm not a huge fan of this list. I know it's been around since basically the printing of Weaver. I got a couple Discord notifications. Let me see what's going on there. Okay. I just think that like this deck is trying to do fair things in an unfair world, and like it's on cards like Adia, Odin 7. Like these are cards that just are not good unless they're hit into the EX damage. But like if you're looking for EX bursts, Adia doesn't answer the Wall 7 board until you get 3 backups down. It doesn't answer the mono ice aggro stuff until then. I'm just not. I get what this list is going for, and I like how low to the ground it plays. Actually, I think cards like Exodus are actually Exodus is a really neat tech, honestly. This Odin is amazing. But I mean, if the point of a card like Adia or Odin and Odin are to be EX bursts, there are decks that just don't care about that as much. Especially like the mono win list I was playing when I played this deck. I hit 5 EX bursts in a row against it, and none of them really mattered, honestly. So these lists continue to perform and do okay. I think this did very well, like I said, prior to Nats and did well at Nats. Didn't show up at Worlds at all, but I think it's kind of a safe pick. It's not bad, and it doesn't use a lot of cards from other decks. So I do like. It's interesting the Y'shtola split. We're on 6 Y'shtola in here, which makes sense. This list is just trying to wipe the board over and over again. But I'm surprised to see the split be 2-1 here. I would have flipped that if I was going to do that. And honestly, I might even just play 3 Wind Y'shtola in the list if I was going to do that. I just think this card is. I think Wind Y'shtola is probably as strong as she has been in a long time. I think this card is so strong right now. Ice Lightning. I'm very interesting. It's very interesting to see the Shinryu here and not in the mono lightning list. Usually, the mono lightning list uses Shinryu to kind of protect its top end, and the ice lightning list needs it a lot less. You have a lot more removal. You have cards like Ishtola, Physalis. That's probably just a player preference thing. They just worked it out amongst themselves. Um, Beyond that, Triple Ixion is the only summon that makes some amount of sense. I think I would have liked to have seen one copy of the new Shiva. I know that like Ice Lightning actually has a lot of recursion between Shantoto and a lot of the Lightning cards can be very recursive. But I mean, we're on stuff like X Death anyway. I feel like one copy of that card would have been actually really solid. I'm also surprised to see no copies of Vincent. I feel like one copy of Vincent could have gone a really long way here. Yeah, I feel like it's weird because like Ice Lightning does not have a board wipe, so Shinryu gives this deck something it doesn't actually normally have. It's just that it's competing with the other Lightning list for this, and I feel like I like it better in the other Lightning list. Yeah, my room is actually getting kind of warm, so I'm going to go ahead and bop this. Definitely a very, very strong deck, and I mean, Ice Lightning has been in such a strong place for a while now. It's funny that like the like which part of it is used most kind of fluctuates in individual metas, but I mean, this deck still has just an unreal number of backup engines. We're not even on the Reeve Kate Sith engine. We're on the President Shinra plus actually yeah, plus or plus Cisne, Restrictor, Narrow Weiss engines, and then just the Arcanist. I wonder how well those did on the weekend because in theory it's really good against Rufus Rug. It's really good against the Warrior of Light list. Like if you can like keep the Warrior of Light dual frozen and just continuously Arcanist them, you can kind of just win the game on the spot with that. I think X Death is actually a really cool card for the format. That's a nice tech. I really like that with the Gilgamesh. Just kind of turning that off for the rest of the game when this guy comes in is really, really nice. This list looks very strong but very standard. Lastly, we have a Firewater Twins Warriors list. 3 Palom, 3 Porum, 3 Firion, 3 Yuzuki. That all makes a lot of sense. One copy of Mog 6. I'm actually surprised it's not at 2 copies. I know this card is very strong right now. I saw the Leftia in this deck come up absolutely massive. This card is amazing for a common. Just unbelievably strong for a common card. I didn't realize until this weekend that it's damage from anything, so even combat damage is increased by 2k, which pairs so well with the Firion as well. You could even do something like Phoenix Leftia in, do the ping, and then first strike your Firion when they're blocking, and like you're in such a good position when that happens. 2 copies of Cyan as the board wipe of choice. I'm a really big fan of this card. I think it's incredibly strong. We're not even on any other crystal generators, I don't think, right? Yeah, it's just Cyan pay 5. But like the modalness of it's really nice. You can go Cyan plus Leftia and just kind of ping things down for 5k per crystal, which is such an insane rate. 3 Amaterasu, 3 Cucullin, which are just the best summons right now. And those elements. The Bahamut, actually I'm a big fan of this card. I like how it says no to a lot of BS. And then, yeah, the Phoenix. In general, I think this looks really, really good. The one Saz, one Moody. We're really trying to make sure we find that Amaterasu. And again, if you could just stick the Tyvus, there's a lot of games you're going to win. I'd be a little interested to see if... Okay, Axtra does play 3OS. I was just saying, I thought he did play 3OS, and just mentally I thought he didn't for a second. But yeah, this looks really good, really standard. Again, I've said for a long time that I think Twins were kind of underexplored just because the Twins engine is so small. It's literally just 3-3 and 1-2, and that's it. And they just win games on their own sometimes, and they still do. And in a format like this, they just continue to generate value over turns if they're not dealt with, and they're so difficult to deal with sometimes. So I think this was a really smart choice. All right, so now we have our third and fourth place. This is Wall Gilgamesh with Tyvus, and Again, this is one of those lists that has a lot of strong things, but it has the exact same issue that I mentioned, which would have scared me off of playing this list in particular. And that is, this list does not have a Citadel out. None of the backups do it. There's no summon for Moody to search to get there. Uke doesn't search one. The only way that you can out Citadel is for Axstar or Ferris to attack, which then just opens the opponent up to if they just dull freeze the Ferris or the Axstar, that you never can beat a Citadel. I think that scares me too much to want to play a list like this. And bad matchups are going to exist. Maybe you're willing to take that risk, but I personally would not be. I would have found one copy of Bahamut or had a game plan for dealing with a Citadel. Beyond that, it's very interesting. Vincent is just a very strong card when he's good. It makes sense. It's just a nice hit off of Warrior of Light. Garland 9 is one I'm actually a little surprised about. I mean, it's not that this card is bad, but I've always thought of this card's biggest use being if you wanted to cheese with Griever, because it causes a stack at the start of your opponent's turn. I'm trying to think like what 3-drop ice card you would play over it if you really wanted that effect, like a similar effect. Honestly, I saw in RVA today there was somebody playing the 3-drop Renoa that when it died it dulled all the forwards. That might actually just not be bad in a format like this where you could just kind of play it off of your Axstar, and then if your opponent ever kills it, you can just go for lethal. So the backups all seem relatively standard. The biggest new thing is Cloud, which Cloud's not bad. If you hit the Cloud, you can go search out another copy of Warrior of Light for 3 CP, which is cool. I've actually thought this card is relatively slept on, so it's a neat little tech for sure. And then we have the other star of the show. This is the Cat 4 Crystal deck. There's a lot of forwards in this list. I'm not going to lie. So we have a very consistent backup line to get multiple colors. You can go Thornton to Claris to King Tycoon to Lena. Materia is an interesting one. I know that Brian, I think it is, yeah, it's Brian, said in the deck profile that he can pretty consistently and pretty happily generate one crystal a turn with Materia. I am less convinced that that is always necessary. I do like the card because I think she gives you a nice top end for that. I would just be scared of running her with Shinryu. He seems to believe he generates enough value to hardcast Shinryu and still board wipe. I haven't played the deck, so I can't testify to if that's true or not. I would honestly consider being on one copy of Light Cecil, and I know that like we have a lot of Cecils competing for that slot, but man, that Light Cecil is so good if you can stick the Hooded Man or the Wind Theodore on the field. I mean, I guess the Theodore's like going through the list. Rosa with Cecil. I knew this like combo was very good ever since I took this to Nats. No surprise there. Porum is going to be at her best in a deck like this because all of the different Cecils are very good at protecting her in different ways. And you can like just remove your opponent's outs to Porum, and we all know that Porum, if left unchecked, will take over the game. I'm actually surprised to not see any Palums in here. With the 3 Rosas and a lot of access to them, it's not that difficult to go Porum, or Rosa, Palum, Porum, and feel pretty good about it. Ursula, I think this card is really, really cool and really slept on. Glaciella is obviously a very powerful card. One copy of Edge. This is also really great and get into rotation very quickly. Another thing about it, I'm surprised there's no Sid Palandina in the backups as well. Theodore, yeah, I mean it's a free forward, but especially because you can go Cecil Rosa and you're just dulling a 1 CP 3K, so you feel pretty good if you do tag this one in. I just am not that enthralled by a free 8K. But he does come back every turn. There's definitely value to it. You can use this to also generate a crystal with Cecil if you don't have any other ways to get a forward onto your field. Hooded Man, he said he thought this could have been Warrior of Light. I actually think it should be, looking at the list, just because we already have multiple copies of this Hooded Man, and I think one of the best ways to stop aggro in a list like this is just go Rosa, Cecil, Warrior of Light. I think just the one copy of Warrior of Light when it comes up would actually just be very, very strong in a list like this. Not that Hooded Man isn't good, it's just he feels pretty unimpactful compared to what Warrior of Light represents. And we already have the name clash. We don't have that many copies of Hooded Man to banish for him. I would be on Warrior of Light personally just because I value that anti-aggro tool so much. As well as just the color fixing tool. We're on a 4-color deck, 3-color deck. Having a card in hand that discards for all colors is actually just very underrated, I think. The Cecil package, all of these are obviously very strong cards. One other thing that would be, I guess we don't have, is that Cecil. As I say, you have the ability to potentially dull this Cecil, but I suppose we don't really have that in this deck in particular. One copy of Fusoya. I don't think you can go higher on this, but it's a really nice top end. I'm sure that he was doing the Yoinky Spoinky trick where you cast Fusoya and stack your own Fusoya to the top of your deck. Ends up being very obnoxious to deal with. I do wonder. So one thing when I played Fusoya in Rydia lists that I've always felt really good about was casting Fusoya off of 2 colors. You can go Fusoya, draw a card, get back a summon, but we've only got the 2 summons in the deck. I would be worried that Fusoya just will not have targets for the summon recursion, meaning that you have to get to at least 3 colors for him to be worth it. It's not impossible. It's not difficult to do that. It just is a downside to the card. Ignis makes a lot of sense here. Cecil's obviously very good, and we have the Shinryus. It's a really cool list. It's one of those lists that I think I would have to actually play before I could really give a fair evaluation to it. Lastly, we have Mono Water. It's a very slim Mono Water list, but I kind of like it for that. 2 of this Shinryu is actually very surprising. I mean, it's really good into the wall list. I don't like it into Rufus Rug, but into Rufus Rug you can discard it and then just instead hold on to your lightning. The Porum was taken up by the other deck, so it has to be on this Porum, which is fine. We have a lot of very strong summons. 3 Tomberry, 2 Echidna, 2 Sahagin Chief. We're not on any copies of Blue Worm, which is very strange to me. I feel like if we're on this many summons, we almost can consider just going on the Folka, right? Like go down a copy of Leviathan, and like down a Shinryu, like go to just 1 copy of this guy, and then go 2 Folka. I think I would have really liked that, honestly. She's a untargetable tool. She kind of just stops the Wall 7 and the Mono Ice decks in their tracks from actually being able to play the game. You could run a copy of Tros and use her as a draw engine. Backups looks pretty normal. No copy of Yagrosh. 2 copies of Yuna, but we're on so many summons we really kind of need to find her. Larsa, Hilda, Sarah, Astrologian, Loporet. Yeah, this seems really interesting. I guess the Yunas are in over the normal Alchemist slot. I could see it. We're on so many different summons. It makes a big deal there, but I do really like the Alchemist. I think it is the water one, the free backups. It's just so easy in mono water to go like turn 1 Sarah, turn 2 Gordon, plus Loporet or Yuna, and then Alchemist, and you're just kind of off to the races at that point, right? Lastly, we have Mike Powell, Kyle Peters, and Chris Lopez. This looks like a pretty standard list. Yeah, no Gustalian Empire Sid. We're on the Scholar instead. I think that's just kind of a personal preference thing. All of this is pretty, yeah, it's pretty normal. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the Tyvis list just because, again, going through here, Cyan, you have to have 2 crystals plus Cyan, which is like not like impossible, but not easy, especially if they get a Charlotte down. Uh, that doesn't deal with it outside of an EX burst. Axstar or Ferris have to attack, and that's it. Those are your only outs, right? So you just have so many fewer outs in that situation. Oh, we do have the Banana Sid. I feel like we have this one different backup in this line than the standard, but I can't piece together what it actually is. I mean, it's Wall 7. It's the best deck in the format, I think, and we have our first Chaos Arc. So, admittedly, I was actually kind of scared to play Chaos Arc just because I thought that so many decks would be sharing colors that you were almost guaranteed every player would have a mono deck. And I thought that that was actually a bit of a risk. However, and as a lot of people probably properly identified, Chaos into mono decks is not unviable as long as you're not getting run down by mono ice. And even against mono ice, one of your best ways to stabilize is to play Chaos. Go Chaos, any top decked Arc, and then an Une kind of just wins you the game, right? So I really get that. We have the Neo X Death as a way to try to deal with the monster decks, and then it's just a very low forward count and try to win the game before things get out of hand. Again, this is the kind of list where you just decide where that it doesn't matter that you're only dealing a couple damage per turn. If you are dealing damage at all and your opponent can't play the game, you have probably won, which is what happens with these Une Chaos Arc lists. I'm a little surprised that we don't have one copy of Rosa. I do get that we're very pressed on space there. We're on trying to make as much work for the. We're trying to slow the game state down as much as possible. We've got stuff like Loporet, try to dig through our deck. 18 backups is so many. But I get it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And this list looks really good. We have the Cancel Leviathan. We're trying to stop the Warrior of Light. Kusith, one Mist Dragon. Mist Dragon's been a weird spot because it's very powerful, but it's very slow. So you just kind of need access to it. I like it. I think this is very strong. Lastly, we have, this was the game that I played on stream, which was Ice Lightning. This also took the Shinryu, so that must just be the thing that Ice Lightning is doing right now, is taking Shinryu. No Zeromus, it was taken by the Wall 7 player. I noticed that immediately when I saw the deck sheet. Beyond that, lots of 3Fs. This is a very, very clean deck list. Maybe the only thing that scares me is Medine, but I mean, this is the deck to be playing Medine in, right? Because we have Unalesca. If we do, Medine is good if either we draw Shinryu or Unalesca. That's probably good enough to be worth the one copy. Ixion, little worried. Yeah, I know that against me, Chris bricked a little bit and couldn't cast Ixion for 5. But I mean, the rest of this list is very smooth. Anything I would consider swapping out here? No, honestly, I really like the list. This is one of the cleaner. Obviously, it should be on Zeromus over the Terra. Maybe go down a copy of Vincent. You don't want to cut any of those. Maybe go down to 2 X Death. I always find that the 3rd X Death is a little bit of overkill. That way you get to the 3 Zeromus. But other than that, I think this list is really strong. I'm curious what Chris's record on the day was before bumping into me. And that is the top 4. So top 8. This is singles. Let's not do singles. 5 through 8. Pretty standard here. We are on Graha, so we could pay 3 and pull a Stola out of the deck. I don't hate that. Still on the Tyvis. That seems to just be standard for everyone that wasn't my team. No Amaterasu. Apparently that was taken by another deck, I'm guessing. It was not. They just declined to play Amaterasu on our list. I don't love that decision. I think that one of the best things that you can do with Warrior of Light is hit Moody to go search Amaterasu and just kind of hold it over your opponent's head the entire time, like a little dog tag, like ha ha ha, look what I got. Graha is actually really nice with these. I didn't ever put that together until now. That's actually a really neat tech. But yeah, I guess we also have a Stola, which is kind of Amaterasu. But I think the difference between having Amaterasu on field and Amaterasu in hand is actually very large. So, other than that, looks pretty normal. Hot Ice. So this is just the Mono Ice aggro list. I'm a little surprised to see 3/3 on the Shivas and see this Terra and not the. I saw a lot of 5-cost Terra, the Waft Terra, because you could go search out this Shiva to get it into rotation, and then use this Shiva to just cantrip a card. And Terra kind of becomes a 3 CP summon searcher. Charlotte, Laswell, Phasalis, we're just on the full night package. Trying to stay low to the ground. Snow Girl is pretty classic at this point. Reno, Rude, Rufus. Yeah, this deck turns things sideways and tries to punch people in the face. Knight, I guess that way we can generate the crystal for Shantoto. I always feel weird on the backups in these lists. Oh, no Sid Randell. That does not seem correct to me. I think you should find room for the Sid Randell in here. I'd maybe drop like a Rude, go down 1 copy of Phasalis, and like go to 2 copies of Shiva 21. I think the 3 Sid Randell is just completely necessary at the moment, to the point where I almost would be on a copy of Mute as well. It's a 3 CP backup that searches out Sid Randell. Then we have a Mono Earth monster list. Or just a Mono Earth. This is really not a monster list at all. We're on Suzuhiza plus Zombie. That's actually a really cool combo. We have the normal Mono Earth backup lists, although we're on Kobold because we're on 3 copies of Titan. I'd be curious to know how that actually went. Do I like Titan in this format? Honestly, I think we might be back in a Titan format. We were in a Shadow Lord format for a while. But thinking on it, Titan does a lot of what Shadow Lord does, but better in the current format because we're not sharing that many jobs. We're not choosing. Kobold gets us that extra reach by bumping Titan to 10k, and we have a pretty large set of forwards ourselves. 2 Neo X Death, that's a little scary. Genova Synthesis, Mont Leonis. I wonder how Zazarg was. You know, big 8k Brave for 2 is very solid, but my big question on this card is we have had this card for a while. We've had the Dataluma from, what's that, is it? Opus 15, that was like the nerfed Dataluma, where if it takes damage from your opponent's forwards at all, it does 8k. And I feel like that's maybe more consistent. I mean, I guess that like this does it off of anything. Like if they do it off of a summon, but it seems like a good anti-aggro tech, so I don't dislike it. I'm just curious how this actually ended up going for them. Mira, I think Titan is an incredibly strong card. I think this card is super, super underrated at the moment. Mist Dragon's really cool. Heck is in a weird spot just because it misses Rug. Is the big one. Missing Rugajin is horrible. but it's not in the worst spot right now, so I get it. Armin, Lumi Pumi. Yeah, I think the only thing is that like, and we're not on enough monsters to make the one-drop mirror worth it. So because we're on Suzuhizo zombie instead. It's a cool concept. I think this is really interesting. Um, all right, we love three ways. This is the Cincinnati team, and this is Tricolor 6. I knew about the Kais tech. The idea with Kais is 6 kind of wants a water backup, but doesn't want to pitch a water card to put a water backup into play. So you could party attack, and then Kais comes in for free, which is good because then you have a water backup for the rest of the game. I think it's still better to just play Andoria and pitch your first water card to Andoria if you're like, I want to have a water backup in my list. And the reason why is I think Andoria makes people scared. Andoria puts the onus on your opponent to stop you from playing the game. And I think when people do that, they get sloppy and they get scared and they make mistakes. I don't think Heist does that in the same way. I think it's a really neat concept. Like I said, the idea of a water backup that doesn't actually cost water. I just am not sure that this is the best way to accomplish this goal. For the rest of the list, we have only one demon is actually surprising. I feel like that's been like a 3F staple in these lists for a while now. We're not on the Cyan backup. We're on the Cyan forward. You know, the weird thing about Shadow and Cyan for the new ones is if the 6 deck could, it would absolutely play the forwards. It just doesn't really have access to do so very easily. I guess because we're on the Terra backup, we're not that scared of not having backups. We're still on 15. We have the Kais, the full 3 Shadow, full 3 Interceptor. And we're not as heavy on the fire. It's really just the Sabins, the Edgars, the Cyans, and the Demon. So, sure, I could see this one. The 3 Amaterasu and the Kais are the only whiffs for 5 CP lock. That's acceptable enough. I know that like a lot of players are just like, I will not ever let lock whiff because then I'm like my turn doesn't work the way I planned it to. I still think it's worth the risk on occasion. You just have to kind of know what you're getting in for. And I think that Amaterasu and Andoria or Kais in the situation are potentially worth it. I think Unicorn is another one you can consider. Unicorn is so good in lists like this, but okay, we have a lightning, fire, ice, water, lightning Gigawall list. We're still on 1 Tyvis. We're not on 3. 2 Alfino, that's standard. Yuzuki. We're on Lena forward. We're trying to use our crystals, which is interesting because we can't revive a 2-drop in this deck. There are none. And we're giving up the Lena backup for it. And we're not on Refia, so that's not like to up the forward count, because if you did, you could just run the Lena backup. 1 copy of Mog. No searcher for it outside of the Tyvis. That's interesting. Ferris, Axstar, Onion Knight, Refia. Oh, we are on Refia. Sorry, I'm blind. So it makes a little more sense then. I still just like the backup, but I get what we're going for now. And it's not difficult to get 2 of these backups down for the Lena to have text. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I get what we're going for. Ishtola, we can hard cast in this deck. 1 Irvine. We're a lot more. We can easily cast Arzaromus freely in this deck. Okay. It's neat. I would actually go for Graha on this list, believe it or not. I think that like going to 2 Ishtola for a Graha Tia would have gone a long way. Get the Alfino out of the deck, maybe. I don't love the Lenas, I'll be honest. I get what we're going for. I just think we have better options. Bump the Mogs up by a copy, and then like... I mean, at 1 it's probably fine, but I would just be looking elsewhere for this. There's got to be just like one more option we're happy with. Lastly, I think this is one of the coolest lists of the tourney, by the way. This is a Mono Ice Shiva 13 list, which is a mouthful. But we're on 15 different Shivas, so we can enable the Shiva 15H. No, not a lot of summon recursion in here. Just the Tela, I believe. So we only get a couple bullets of this. But something very unique to this list is that we have 13. We can basically one-shot our opponent and just lock them out of the game with these. And this actually gives access to a lot of really neat techs. I think this Shiva is a really funny way to just win the game against some decks. You can have like the lightning and the snow, use this Shiva, lock the damage, and then just win on the next game, right? Sarah is a very powerful card, but this is a weird deck because this is like a 13 deck that has to scale, and then uses lightning as a finisher payload. This is, funnily enough, probably what they had in mind when they designed lightning, is using her as like the scaling finisher and not this like turn 2, turn 5, they're dead card. I would be a little scared piloting this list that you're a little low on 13 forwards. We have 16. I think I might run the forward Mog 13 too, to be quite honest. It's like tricky because like the backup obviously is always going to be good, but the forward Mog 13 too kind of lets you Schrodinger's Mog, or Schrodinger's Power Bump, which actually really matters, believe it or not. I think it's very difficult for your opponent to actually deal with cards when they don't know what power they're going to be. And for a 1 CP category 13 forward, I think that's actually really valuable. 3 Juggler, that's actually an interesting one. I guess it's allowing us to be more aggro. And back attack backups are actually always very, very interesting. Cocytus, I don't love this one, admittedly. It's like, I guess if you get like to a late game, it's a dull freeze on a backup, but like, I don't know. I think we're past the point for a card like this. If you say, oh, cool, what do you run instead? I would be on something like Minwu. Just freeze a character. I think it's very powerful for your opponent to play a backup, and then you play a backup that blocks them from using their backup. And Cocytus only really hits forwards. I might just be salty because I stole this with Zidane, but 3 Girl with only 2 targets is also a little bit scary, but it's very good, so I get it. And both Terra and Snow are valid targets. And the rest of this is doing the 1-1-1-1-1 thing, which I think is actually just pretty respectable. Yeah, I would maybe like cut the Cocytus, cut the Mog 13, get 2 copies of Armorer in there, so I feel better scaling. But this is a really innovative list. I've said before, I don't think 13 has to play Fire Lightning. I think Fire Ice is just as strong. I think Fire Wind is very strong. This is the first time I've seen Mono Ice, but I get it looking at this. One more thing. Jill Nabat is a really cool tech as well. She's really big if you don't have lightning on the field. And choosing 2 characters is actually pretty solid. So she gives you an extra attacker for lightning that also kind of does other things. Very impressed with this card of the game. I saw it played. Alright. We're going to keep going. Probably will have to do a separate video for the singles tourney. 13. Who is this? This is Will Coghill. That makes sense. Pretty normal. Yeah, this is pretty standard. Not much to say. We are on Godot, Zidane. We're trying to high roll a little bit. I like if you're going to high roll the Godot, Zidane. I really like Fenrir. I think that shutting off targeting lightning is very powerful. But we're not in a format where there's a lot of summons running around, so maybe it is actually correct to not bother with that. I just assume that your lightning is going to be fine anyway. Yeah, almost more backups than I would expect for this, but I think that actually makes sense. Looks good. Looks really powerful. Warrior of Light, again with the Tyvis package. That just is the standard right now for these lists. Interestingly, we're on Cucullin. We gave the Amaterasu to our 13 pilots. Um, I think this should be Bahamut. I think we really want a way to stop a Sid Randell or a copy of Neo X Death, and Cucullin just doesn't really do that. It's a good card. It's very useful, but yeah. So we're on the edge. Award, realm. This is it's basically the standard list, just with Cucullin instead of Amaterasu. Not much more to see here then. And then we have the Mono Ice Aggro by Dorian Finn. So this is a card that is very, very potent. A lot of people have just kind of not given this card a lot of credit lately. But Mono Ice can actually struggle with removal, dealing with cards like Neo X Death. And Don Corneo actually gives the deck a clean out to them. Milling 15, you don't care. You're never getting to 15 cards anyway. You're just setting up your break zone for Shiva to have fodder for the rest of the game. We don't care about backups at all. Everything we have is even costed except for Physalis. And I'm not sure we should be on. I mean, Physalis Rug is really good, but this is a list that tries to go fast and end the game. I would maybe consider running a copy of like Ezael or Mute to get access to our Sid Randells. But there's a pretty good chance our opponent's just dead before we get there anyway. Imaro's another interesting one. Like we have this is a 4 CP forward that we can do a point of damage with, and then force our opponent to discard 2. It's like a one-time Rufus. You can go to a 0 card to hand in this deck pretty easily. You can go like, let me think, 3. If you go second, it's very possible to go. This is a dream turn. Laswell freeze their backup. Sky Serpent General Rug. Umaro. Attack with Rug. Attack Umaro. Use the Umaro ability. Make your opponent discard 2 cards. So you've ripped their hand apart. You've done them 2 points of damage, and they still have to deal with Rug plus Laswell. That seems pretty good. This is a very normal angry deck. And lastly, 8th after Swiss. This is Fire Lightning. And yeah, okay, we're gonna stick Neo X Death, and we're going to kill our opponent. Neo X Death's in a really strong place right now. A lot of decks cannot build into this whatsoever. The Mono Ice list can struggle with it because they don't maintain hand advantage. They don't have their removal that hits 10k. This card just eats them alive. And Gigawall can actually struggle into it as well. A lot of their stuff instantly targets. A lot of their removal doesn't hit 10k. I think it's just a card that's in a good spot. I'm not going to comment on Behemoth K. Y'all probably know my opinion on this card by now. I'm just not a fan of it. Hooded Man with 1 copy of Canes. We have 4 copies. That's fine. Squall, Axstar. Do we have 17 EX bursts? Okay. Axstar makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so this reminds me a lot of the Mono Lightning lists, where it's like they're like a weird aggro mid-range list, but the idea is if you try to out aggro them, they're going to EX burst you to oblivion, but if you don't aggro them, they're going to aggro you down and win. 1 Irvine, I don't love Irvine at 1. I think this is a 3 or 0 card for me. I think the special is that important for the card's viability. So I would find room for the rest of them. We have a lot of backups here too. Holy cow. Miyu, Mutsuki, Quan, Seymour, 1-1. Oh, we're just on the 1-1-1-1-1 train on backups. These are standard unit backups that aren't actually standard units. 8 CPX Death. I've not seen that in a while. I don't hate it. It's very powerful when it goes off. You just have to make sure you're not getting absolutely booty blasted when you go for it. Yeah. I like the list. I think it's very cool. Um, I mean, there's not much to say here. I would have liked to have seen the Don Corneo here again. I think it's just too important when it's good. One Sid Randell. I think this could have easily been bumped to 3. I guess we are on 2 Azale, so it's kind of like we're on 3, but I'm so big on Sid Randell right now. I think you can play Remedy in the current format and just say if your opponent hard draws Wall, you probably lose, but like if you're playing Remedy to try to stop Wall, then you probably lose anyway if you open Remedy and not Sid. But I think it's completely defensible to play a card that draws a card when your opponent discards, and the card it draws shuts out half of the current meta decks. So I think being on just Woodson Randell would scare the crap out of me, especially because there's no recursion. Or there is, I guess, a Shantoto, but like one thing that I noticed this weekend is outing the first Sid Randell isn't always the hardest thing, but getting the second and the third ones can be so much more difficult once you start getting locked. I played against a Sid Randell list in the singles day, and one of the things that was really difficult was I had to Shantoto to clear the first Sid Randell, and then my opponent got a second one into play on the same turn I Shantoto'd. So I was locked out of abilities the entire time. I had to really dig to find my Dryad to clear the Sid Randell. And I think that that's something that really matters. So I think the repeatability of Sid Randell is as important as having access to the card. I think you need to be on 3 of this card in the current format. In fact, I should go order mine because I actually don't have a playset of the card. So it's a good reminder to myself that actually this card is game and meta determinative right now. And lastly, I'll talk about this a lot more when we talk about the actual decks that did well in the singles tourney. But this is DFF Bounce House. I don't want to talk too much about Tori's thought process on some of this, just because I don't know how much of it he wants to make public. But I will say that I played against this deck. It is very, very potent and very, very good. I think it's one of the best decks at abusing Y'shtola, which again is a card that I think is as strong as she's ever been. I think it gives the deck an out to dealing with cards that it hates, like the Neo X Death, like Wall 7, but and then the backups especially are very powerful in this list. Going Sarah, King Tycoon, Lena is obviously incredible. Loporrit is just absolutely busted. Very necessary in this list because of the 3 Shinryu. Verena, Princess Goblin, Princess Sarah, I'm a little less high on, especially because like we don't have a great use for our Warrior of Light here. But I do get it. I kind of wonder if maybe it would be better to just run the Princess Sarah Legend. I know that like there's a lot of flexibility in this being 1 CP, but we're not very high on our win backup count. We are running 1, 2, 3, 4 princesses in the list. Like the quote unquote special on Princess Sarah is like you could even cut the Warrior of Light generates a crystal in entry and like it's kind of like untargetable, which can matter, but his body is so small that being untargetable doesn't really change that much. In comparison, you can run 2 copies of Princess Sarah and use the second one as a special for the first, or Princess Sarah with the third Lena and really abuse the Y'shtola. But I really feel like Princess Goblin being able to get or fetch CP would have really mattered. And as a bonus for Tori, I wouldn't have stolen his Warrior of Light both games and made his Princess Goblins draw dead for the rest of the time. But it's an incredibly powerful list. Basically, Realm is completely busted. I don't know what they were thinking with this card. I know what they were thinking. They were thinking monsters suck. We can do anything we want to with them. But that was not true. Monsters did not suck badly enough to print a card this busted. So major props and congrats to Tori for winning singles. I'll talk more about this list again probably tomorrow when I get to that. But this video has been almost an hour long of me discussing decks. I don't think that the YouTube algorithm would be happy if I put together a hour 20, so this will be a two-parter. So stay tuned for tomorrow, where I will go over the singles event.